Have you ever found yourself in a situation where temptation seemed to surround you from every angle? Where the wrong path looked so inviting, yet something deep inside urged you to stay true to your values? This internal battle is as old as humanity itself. In the fading light of a Jerusalem evening around 1000 BC, a king knelt alone. His hands raised in desperate prayer, his voice carrying into the twilight air. That king was David, and the words he uttered that evening would echo through millennia, eventually becoming what we now know as Psalm 141. What makes this particular prayer so captivating? Unlike many triumphant psalms of praise, Psalm 141 captures a raw moment of vulnerability, a spiritual leader actively fighting against temptation in real time. It's a prayer for protection not just from external enemies, but from the enemy within ourselves. The ancient Hebrews had a tradition of offering evening incense at the temple as the day's final sacrifice. As the smoke rose toward heaven, Psalm 141 draws on this powerful image, suggesting our prayers themselves rise like incense before God. But what exactly was David praying about, and why does it still resonate with us today? Jerusalem, 1000 BC. The United Kingdom of Israel is at its height under King David's rule. The nation has expanded its borders, defeated enemies, and enjoys relative prosperity. Yet behind the scenes, the king himself fights personal battles that no military victory can resolve. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals a complex society transitioning from tribal confederacy to centralized monarchy. The Davidic dynasty, established around 1010 BC according to traditional chronology, brought political stability but also new moral challenges. Wealth, power, and access created temptations unknown to the simpler shepherd boy David once was. Scholars debate the exact circumstances that prompted this psalm. Some connect it to David's flight from Saul, dating it earlier to around 1020 BC. Others see references to his later moral failures, particularly the Bathsheba incident of approximately 997 BC. The psalm itself doesn't specify, perhaps intentionally, allowing its message to speak to various situations where moral guidance is desperately needed. The Hebrew text opens with Mizmor el David, a psalm of David, placing it among the 73 psalms attributed to him. While modern scholarship sometimes questions these attributions, the emotional authenticity and literary style align with what we know of David's other writings. Let's explore this remarkable ancient prayer line by line, uncovering its timeless wisdom for navigating moral challenges in our own lives. O Lord, I call upon you, hasten to me. Give ear to my voice when I call to you. The prayer begins with urgency. The Hebrew word used here, chush, suggests not just speed but intensity. David isn't scheduling a casual conversation with God. He's sending an emergency signal. This reflects the universal human experience of moral crisis, when we suddenly realize we need guidance before making a potentially devastating choice. Imagine yourself in David's position, a leader with immense responsibility, facing decisions that affect not just his own life but an entire nation. The weight of these choices would be overwhelming. Research in decision psychology shows that moral fatigue is real. After making numerous ethical decisions, our resolve weakens. David recognized this vulnerability in himself. Let my prayer be counted as incense before you, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. Here, David connects his personal prayer to the established religious rituals of ancient Israel. The evening sacrifice, known as the Tamid offering, was performed daily at twilight according to Exodus 29 verses 38 to 41. It included burning incense, which created a sweet-smelling smoke that rose upward. This visual metaphor of prayer ascending to heaven appears across many religious traditions. Archaeological excavations at sites like Tel Dan and Arad have uncovered ancient Israelite altars dating to this period, with residues showing the burning of frankincense and other aromatic substances. These physical artifacts connect us to the tangible reality of the worship practices David references. Set a guard, O Lord, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips. Now we reach the heart of David's concern. He's not primarily worried about external enemies but about his own words and, by extension, his thoughts and actions. The Hebrew phrase, shamra, set a guard, borrows military terminology, suggesting David sees his own speech as a potential battleground. Recent neuroscience confirms what David intuited: our words shape our reality. Dr. Andrew Newberg's research at Thomas Jefferson University reveals that negative speech patterns actually alter brain function. David, without access to brain scans, recognized that controlling his speech was essential to maintaining moral integrity. Do not let my heart incline to any evil, to busy myself with wicked deeds in company with men who work iniquity, and let me not eat of their delicacies. This verse reveals David's awareness of social influence. The phrase, "let me not eat of their delicacies," is particularly insightful, acknowledging how temptation often comes packaged as something pleasant and desirable. The Hebrew word, manam, delicacies, suggests not just food but luxurious indulgences. Social psychologist Solomon Asch's conformity experiments in the 1950s demonstrated how easily humans can be influenced by peer pressure, sometimes even denying obvious truths to fit in with a group. David, 3 millennia earlier, recognized this tendency in himself and prayed for strength to resist it. Historical context enriches our understanding here. During David's reign, approximately 1010 to 970 BC, Israel was increasingly exposed to neighboring cultures through trade and diplomatic relations. Phoenician luxury goods, Egyptian artistic influences, and Canaanite religious practices all presented alluring alternatives to traditional Hebrew monotheism. The archaeological record shows increasing material prosperity during this period, creating new temptations for the previously nomadic society. Let a righteous man strike me, it is a kindness. Let him rebuke me, it is oil for my head. Let my head not refuse it. This verse demonstrates remarkable humility from a king. David acknowledges his need for accountability, even if it comes through painful correction. The reference to oil connects to ancient hospitality customs where honored guests would receive fragrant oil on their heads. David cleverly inverts this, suggesting that even criticism from the righteous should be received as a blessing. The Hebrew word for strike, halam, can also mean to hammer, suggesting David isn't talking about gentle correction but potentially harsh truth-telling. For a monarch with absolute power, this willingness to be corrected represents extraordinary self-awareness. History records few ancient Near Eastern kings who voluntarily subjected themselves to moral accountability. Most rulers of David's era, like Egypt's Pharaoh Solomon or Tyre's King Hiram, were considered divine or semi-divine, above correction. David's approach represents a radical departure from this pattern. Yet my prayer is continually against their evil deeds. When their judges are thrown over the cliff, then they shall hear my words, for they are pleasant. This somewhat cryptic verse transitions to the second half of the psalm, which focuses more on external adversaries. Some scholars believe it references the practice of executing criminals by throwing them from cliffs, well documented in the ancient Near East. Others see it as a metaphorical description of God's judgment on corrupt leaders. The historical context matters. David's reign followed the chaotic period of the Judges, when Israel had no central authority and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Judges 21 verse 25. Having witnessed the consequences of moral relativism, David understood the importance of objective ethical standards. As when one plows and breaks up the earth, so shall our bones be scattered at the mouth of Sheol. This vivid agricultural metaphor draws on the everyday experience of David's agrarian society. Plowing disrupts the orderly surface to prepare for new growth. Similarly, David acknowledges that moral transformation often requires painful disruption of comfortable patterns. Archaeological findings from Iron Age Israel, circa 1200 to 1000 BC, reveal the agricultural technologies referenced here. Simple wooden plows reinforced with iron would break up the rocky soil of the Judean hillsides, a backbreaking but necessary preparation for planting. David uses this familiar image to convey spiritual truth. But my eyes are toward you, O God, my Lord. In you I seek refuge. Leave me not defenseless. This verse represents the psalm's pivotal moment. After acknowledging his vulnerability to temptation and the potentially severe consequences of moral failure, David reaffirms his fundamental orientation toward God. The Hebrew phrase, hasidivak, I seek refuge, suggests not passive hiding but active trust. Psychologically, this illustrates what modern therapists call recentering, the practice of returning to core values when under stress. David demonstrates emotional intelligence by recognizing his need to reconnect with his spiritual foundation when facing moral challenges. Keep me from the trap that they have laid for me and from the snares of evildoers. Animal trapping was common in ancient Israel, both for food and pest control. Archaeological sites reveal stone traps and metal snares dating to this period. David employs this familiar imagery to describe the subtle dangers of moral compromise. Like well-camouflaged traps, they're often invisible until it's too late. The Hebrew word, moksh, trap, appears 27 times in biblical literature, frequently as a metaphor for moral or spiritual danger. This language would have resonated powerfully with David's original audience, for whom hunting and trapping were everyday concerns. Let the wicked fall into their own nets, while I pass by safely. The psalm concludes with confident hope. David doesn't pray for personal vengeance against those who would lead him astray, but simply that their harmful intentions would ultimately backfire. The final phrase in Hebrew, Yad ani iver, can be translated, while I alone pass by, suggesting David's willingness to walk a solitary moral path if necessary. This ending reflects a fundamental truth validated by modern psychology. Moral courage often requires swimming against the social current. As Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl would later write, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. So what can we learn from this ancient prayer, uttered by a king in Jerusalem over 3,000 years ago? First, David's prayer reminds us that moral vigilance is necessary for everyone, regardless of status. Even as Israel's most successful king, David recognized his susceptibility to ethical compromise. Modern scandals involving respected leaders reinforce this timeless truth: character requires constant attention. Second, the psalm highlights the importance of proactive spiritual disciplines. David doesn't wait until after temptation to pray. He establishes guardrails in advance. This aligns with findings from behavioral science showing that pre-commitment strategies dramatically improve decision-making under pressure. Third, David acknowledges the powerful role of community in shaping character. When he asks God to keep him from eating delicacies with wrongdoers, he recognizes that we become like the people we associate with. Modern network science confirms this insight. Our moral choices are significantly influenced by our 5 closest relationships. Archaeological evidence from David's Jerusalem, particularly finds from the City of David excavations beginning in 1867 under Charles Warren and continuing to today, provides fascinating context for this psalm. The rapidly urbanizing society created new forms of wealth inequality, social stratification, and moral complexity, challenges that may have contributed to David's spiritual anxiety reflected in this prayer. Biblical scholars note that Psalm 141 contains several rare Hebrew words and unusual grammatical constructions, suggesting it may have been composed in a moment of intense emotion rather than as a carefully crafted literary work. This authenticity may explain its enduring power. It captures a real human being wrestling with real temptation. The psalm's relevance extends beyond religious contexts. Secular ethicists like Harvard's Michael Sandel have noted that moral formation requires intentional practices, not just theoretical knowledge. Psalm 141 outlines practical steps for ethical living: watchful speech, selective associations, accountability to others, and reconnection with core values. Comparative religious studies reveal similar prayers across traditions. The Buddhist practice of right speech parallels David's request for a guard over his mouth. Islamic tradition emphasizes similar themes in the concept of muraqabah, or vigilant self-observation. This cross-cultural resonance suggests Psalm 141 taps into universal human wisdom about moral formation. Throughout history, this psalm has provided comfort and guidance to those facing moral challenges. Early Christian desert monks recited it as protection against temptation. Medieval Jewish communities incorporated it into evening prayers. During the American Civil Rights Movement, leaders like Howard Thurman found in it a model for maintaining moral integrity amid opposition. When Martin Luther King Jr. faced death threats during the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955 to 1956, he later wrote of praying words reminiscent of Psalm 141, asking for strength not to hate his opponents. King understood, as David did, that moral victory begins with guarding one's own heart. On April 3, 1968, the night before his assassination, King delivered his famous "I've been to the mountaintop" speech in Memphis. Though he didn't directly quote Psalm 141, his words echoed its themes of moral courage in the face of danger. Like David, King found strength by reconnecting with his deepest values when under threat. In our own era, characterized by instant communication and constant distraction, David's prayer for mindful speech and ethical clarity seems more relevant than ever. The average person encounters more persuasive messages in a day than our ancestors might have seen in a month. This barrage makes moral discernment increasingly challenging. Research from the Stanford Social Media Lab shows that exposure to social media increases moral emotionality while potentially decreasing moral reasoning. Without practices like those David outlines, intentional speech, careful associations, accountability relationships, and spiritual centering, we become vulnerable to manipulative influences. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman's research at Stanford University demonstrates that attention directs neuroplasticity. We become what we focus on. When David prays, "My eyes are toward you, O God," he intuitively understands this principle. By consciously directing his attention toward his highest values, he shapes his brain's physical structure. Beyond individual ethics, Psalm 141 speaks to our collective moral challenges. As historian Yuval Noah Harari notes in *Sapiens*, 2011, human societies require shared ethical frameworks to function. David's insistence on objective moral standards, rather than simply following the crowd, offers wisdom for navigating our pluralistic society. The Psalm's emphasis on speech is particularly relevant in our digital communication landscape. When David asks for a guard over his mouth, he recognizes that words create reality. Recent work by linguistic anthropologists confirms this insight. Our language shapes our perception and ultimately our actions. Perhaps most powerfully, this ancient prayer acknowledges the universal human struggle with moral consistency. Even King David, described elsewhere as a man after God's own heart, recognized his need for daily ethical vigilance. This honesty about human vulnerability creates space for authentic moral growth without perfectionism. Each evening in Jerusalem, as the sun set behind the western hills, the temple priests would offer the final sacrifice of the day. Incense would rise into the darkening sky, symbolizing the community's prayers ascending to heaven. For thousands of years, Jews and later Christians would recite Psalm 141 at this same hour, connecting their individual moral struggles to this ancient tradition. The practice continues in many communities today. In Orthodox Jewish evening prayers, in Catholic Vespers services, in monastic communities around the world, these same words echo as darkness falls. The image of prayer rising like incense reminds us that our personal moral choices have meaning beyond ourselves. As we reflect on this ancient prayer, we might consider our own need for ethical guardrails. What words emerge from our mouths without sufficient thought? Whose influence shapes our values, for better or worse? What practices help us reconnect with our deepest principles when temptation arises? These questions transcend religious boundaries. Whether one shares David's specific theological beliefs or not, his psychological insights into moral formation remain profound. The patterns he established, mindful speech, selective associations, accountability to others, and regular reconnection with core values, create a framework for ethical living in any context. In the evening moments of our own lives, when fatigue lowers our defenses and temptation feels strongest, David's ancient words offer a time-tested path forward. Like incense rising through the Jerusalem twilight, may our own choices lift us toward our highest aspirations. In the silence of your own evening moments, what guards do you need to place over the door of your lips? What delicacies might you need to refuse? And most importantly, where do you turn for refuge when moral clarity seems just beyond reach? These questions, first articulated by a king 3 millennia ago, still light our path through today's ethical wilderness. Before you go, I want to personally invite you to be part of our growing community here at Prayer Universe. If this video touched your heart or brought you peace, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a prayer or message that can uplift your spirit. But most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, share just one word or phrase of motivation that this video inspired in you, whether it's hope, gratitude, peace, or something else. Your words matter deeply to us because they help guide the content we create for this channel. Together, let's build a space filled with faith, encouragement, and connection. Thank you for being here, and remember, every prayer counts. See you in the next one.